Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very important election coming up within the next 5 days, and it'll be consequential to everyone. And I just wanted to talk about democracy because that's a big issue that comes up every 4 years during the presidential election years. There's a big talk about, oh, this candidate's a threat to democracy, oh, that candidate's bad for democracy. But I want to talk about it from a biblical perspective. I think that that's really important. It puts things in perspective. And I'm seeing a ton of teachers that are saying, well, in order to be a believer, you need to be participating in the process. But that is not biblical from a standpoint of just looking at pure scriptures. It doesn't make sense to say that people need to be participating, or that their salvation or that their spiritual life is very contingent upon that. So let me go ahead. There's a video from a preacher that I wanted to play, and he happens to be, he's teaching some big messianic congregation down in Tennessee that they need to be participating in the political process because of what Jesus had to say about Caesar. So let's go ahead and listen in for a minute.
Paul encouraged believers to obey the rulers and the authorities that God has set over us. And that included paying taxes. And he says this, first of all, because it's the right thing for us as believers to do. But he says it also because he has hopes that we might be able to lead peaceful and quiet lives. And so being subject to rulers and leaders and governments is, in Paul's thinking, how we more readily live a peaceful life, which is obviously desirable for us all. So my point then is that Paul addressed the fact that in an apples and oranges way, in comparison to what Yeshua said, we are called upon to render unto Caesar that which pertains to Caesar. I also want you to keep this in mind. Paul lived in a world, Yeshua lived in a world for that matter, but they lived in a world that was subject to tyrants, to monarchies, all these kinds of things. And so if Paul said that under those particular conditions, how much more desirable would it have been for Paul and for others? I'm talking about believers now. How much more desirable would it have been for them to not be under the rule of tyrants and despots? In other words, if Paul longed to live a peaceful and quiet life, would he not have opted to enjoy more freedoms had he been given that opportunity?
Okay. So what he is telling his congregation essentially is that they should be voting because of a verse where it says, render to Caesar what is his, and is extending that beyond pure taxation. That's problematic. And then is going into hypotheticals about whether Paul would have voted in the election had he been given the opportunity. No one was given a ballot 2,000 years ago, and going into the realm of hypotheticals doesn't help us understand the scripture. So we're going to go to Mark, and we're going to go to chapter 12, and we're going to read in the context that Yeshua was talking about. So here he says, all right, here we go. Later, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? So the Pharisees are speaking from a position of, well, there's a temple tax, so do I have to pay another tax to Rome on top of that? Caesar doesn't care. He pays absolutely no mind to what they have to do in accordance with their Jewish religion, but he wants them to be paying these taxes. So Yeshua knew their hypocrisy and says, Why are you trying to trap me? Bring me a denarius and look at it. And then he says, Whose image is this? Whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. So then Yeshua said to them, Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. So notice that the preachers are taking this out of context. It is simply about paying the imperial tax. He might not just be talking to Jews, but he might be talking to sovereign citizens. You might have had believers in Jesus during this time who felt that they were sovereign citizens, or who felt, or followers of Jesus who thought that they were sovereign, who thought that they could just, do whatever they want. So I have a form here, and it's from the IRS. And the reason why I have this form is because they sent me something saying that there was a little portion of my taxes that weren't done totally right. And so they said, you need to pay $112 or so. And so I just sent them the money. So there is no sovereign citizen in the Bible. There is no, I can evade my taxes. We're subject to the laws and the rules and the codes that they make. We fall under them. But there's no specific commandment that Yeshua talks about in this, chapter in the New Testament to vote. There is no commandment. So I just want to put that out there. So for people that are doing harm in that sense, we just need to quiet down about this. And I say this in the most respectful and loving manner possible. People are sending me all kinds of links right now. And another thing that we need to consider is that let's look at democracy, actually. Let's look at the definition on Wikipedia. I think it's really important that we do that as well. So if I can go ahead and share that screen. Democracy. It's from ancient Greek. It's a system of government in which state power is vested in the people or the general population of a state. Now, this is really important. Look at the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble of the Constitution says, we the people. The preamble. It's about people ruling. Now, the ideal in God's mind, at least if you read the Torah, was one nation under Elohim, one nation under God, but truly a nation under God, where he would be the benevolent dictator ruling, and he might have some judges, but ultimately everything would be operating from his authority. Another thing I'd like to consider is let's look at the actually not even paleo, but pictographic, or I guess there is some paleo on here, Hebrew, and Babylon in the Hebrew, it's read from right to left, remember, and Babylon is Beit, and Lamed. So Beit Lamed means that authority comes from two houses. So in Babylon, we get authority from multiple places. We get authority from, at least in our case, in the United States of America, a bicameral legislature. In Congress, we have two houses. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. I am obliged to pay taxes. They pass laws that say I must pay taxes. The 16th Amendment says the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. Meaning, they have the authority to make laws to levy taxes. We know that Paul has an entire chapter in Romans 13 about our need to obey the government. However, democracy in and of itself is not a biblical thing. We got to go to Numbers 16, and I want to let's go to the first few verses of that chapter. In fact, let me pull it up on here on this screen so that people can see it. So, Numbers chapter 16. And I'm having some technical difficulties here, so bear with me. Here we go. It says, Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On son of Peleth, became insolent and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" So it says that there were 250 Israelite men of renown. So we have Moses and Aaron, who are specifically appointed to lead the nation of Israel by God. So this is benevolent dictatorship, two very specific people that have the final say, mainly Moses. And then we have 250 people who claim jurisdiction over their own communities rising up against them. So this is a house divided against itself. That is they, the people, deciding that they're going to commit an insurrection and choose who their leaders are. And the consequence in this chapter, number 16, is that by being insurrectionists, they die. Notice something about all the isms: communism, democracy, consumerism, capitalism, conservatism. A lot of them are not really any different from each other. A lot of them are just as unbiblical as each other, and a lot of words have become more vague and less defined. These days, a conservative is not someone that follows scriptures. It's not someone that wants to follow Elohim. It's someone who has a certain ideological position, but then that ideological position has now become a big umbrella that welcomes people from all paths of life. You can have a stripper or someone from OnlyFans be a part of this movement. And when you have a big coalition of people deciding who their government is going to be, that's not the way that Yahweh wanted it to be. But that is the system that we are operating under. One warning from Yeshua specifically that we should remember is those who exalt themselves will be humbled. This assembly that tried to overthrow Moshe and Aaron and Aharon were humbled because they decided that they were in charge, not Yahweh, even though Yahweh said Moses and Aaron were in charge. And then it says that those who humble themselves will be exalted. Well, Moses and Aaron. Moses was one of the most humble people in the congregation. He was exalted by Yahweh. Yahweh said, "You are the leader of this congregation." But the congregation wanted to engage in a democratic process, also known as mob rule, to overthrow these two leaders. And that's what happens when we're operating under a bicameral legislature, three levels of government, and federalism. We have different government. We have different governments with different jurisdictions trying to make different decisions on similar issues. For example, Congress might not want to cancel student debt, but President Joe Biden might say, "I have the executive authority to cancel $8 billion in student loans." So you have a division there. And the intention and the intention of the framers of this very document called the Constitution was to be able to have a government that was limited and not trampling over the people. But look at where we've gotten. People have demanded more and more regulation, and they've only gotten more and more jurisdiction. And this kind of government lasts for a good while until it collapses. And that's what Yeshua warned about. He said a house divided against itself would fall. So we vote in these different leaders for different positions of government, and they're all practically at war with each other. You know, they have a good fight, ideological fight in front of us, and then in the background, everybody's having fun with each other. But in reality, a house that is ideologically or religiously or philosophically divided is not going to survive. And that boils down to synagogues, that boils down to households. So what these people are preaching about, people being obligated to vote, is a falsehood. I don't judge anybody for voting. I will not judge anybody for voting. If somebody feels like they want to vote in a presidential or a local or a state election or on state propositions, they may do so. But democracy in and of itself, according to scripture, has always been a form of rebellion against Yahweh. Now I want to go ahead and look at another chapter, and it's about Jesus's or Yeshua's death. And if we go to Matthew chapter 27, and let's go to verses 11 through 35. Let's go to verses 11 through 35. Matthew chapter 7, verses 11 through 35. I'll give everybody a moment to flip there while I go to the new let's go to the New American Standard Bible. Now Yeshua stood before the governor, and the governor questioned him, saying, So you are the king of the Jews." So he was being delivered up, and Yeshua said to him, "It is as you say." And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not offer any answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they are testifying against you?" And still he did not answer him in regard to even a single charge. So the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the Passover feast, the governor was accustomed to release the people, any one prisoner whom they wanted. And at that time, they were holding a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when the people gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ?" For they knew that it was because of envy that they handed him over. So jealousy. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him a message saying, "See that you have nothing to do with that righteous man, for last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds, okay, to ask Barabbas and to put Jesus to death. Persuaded the crowds. What does this sound like? This is I don't know why that popped up. This is democracy. This is mob rule. When people are are putting people up to die. I mean, this is a mob asking for our Messiah to die. Democracy killed the Messiah. And so uh basically they said crucify him. And in many other translations, it doesn't even say the crowds, it says the people. Again, that refers back to the first three letters in this constitution. If we read this chapter, it says the people. So if I go ahead and let's come back here, the people. He persuaded the crowds to ask for this. So, you know, that's it for you right there. They kept shouting, "Crucify him," and they got what they wanted. Now let's go ahead and I want to go to Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13 tells us that we have to obey the laws of the land. And hold on just a second while I load that up. Romans 13. For the one in authorities is in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do no wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for the rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. So again, no sovereign citizen stuff. Look, you've gotta follow the laws of the land. That does not mean that you were supposed to be voting. You can, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to be voting. So these rulers, these people, they're appointed directly by God. So at the end of the day, God has the final say, whether you cast a vote or don't. Yahweh has the final say. You want to talk about the hidden hand? He's the real hand behind it all. He's going to use the rulers of a nation to judge the nation for their sin. The further away we want to get from God, a ruler that we're going to get is going to be further away from God as well. They're going to lead us further away from God. So, Yahweh would rather have a dictator king, and he's always wanted that dictator king to be himself, which is why Yeshua is going to come back and set up his kingdom and rule with a rod of iron. And according to the Daniel prophecy, that kingdom is going to be handed to the people to rule in Yeshua's place. There's some agency going on there. But with a government, like Caesar wasn't voted in, so in a government where we are choosing our rulers, especially if we were doing this in the land, when Yahweh said, "These are your rulers over you," if we wanted to try to subdue Yahweh's authority, then that is direct rebellion against him. Paul exhorts us to pray for our leaders. He exhorts us to do that regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. I don't care if they're Democratic. I don't care if they're Republican. I don't care if they're Libertarian or Green Party. If you're a Christian, you should be praying for Kamala Harris if she gets in office. You should be praying for Donald Trump if he happens to get in office through a process that Yahweh does not necessarily endorse, or that he doesn't get behind it. He can't, because it's contrary to his will. Communism, even in communism, there are revolutionaries that have sought to install their own leaders. In China, there was a revolution, and then they the people chose Mao Zedong to be their new leader. They put that party headship in place. Of course, that then led to their oppression, but the end of this, the moral of the story is that they chose that rulership and leadership. They chose that house to be over them. We're confused. We're in the nations. And so we're doing things that are contrary to Yahweh's will a lot of the time without even realizing it. And that's actually going to take me to Matthew chapter 16. Or actually, no, that's not Matthew chapter 16. Let me actually look at this verse again. Wrong chapter. Let's go to Mark chapter 8, actually. So another book in the Gospel of Mark. Mark chapter 8, and let's go to verse 15. And what does Yeshua tell his disciples here? This is very important. Okay. This is Yeshua talking to his disciples, and he was giving orders to them, saying, "Watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod." So if you've seen my previous videos, we've already gone over what the leaven of the Pharisees is. The leaven of the Pharisees is the Pharisees putting their Judaic traditions, Judaism, Hanukkah, Purim, Jewish New Year, the Babylonian and New Jerusalem Talmud. Okay, these things that people are adding into the word of God. But then you have the leaven of Herod. So Herod has his own spells and tools of control as well. I've met a lot of people in government that act through deception. People, who work either at a county registrar, or maybe they're secretary of state, maybe they run elections of some sort. And one of the things I've been told several times is that the machines don't tamper with anything. The machines are totally safe. We're always told by government, we need this new law for a bailout to protect our economy. We need this new law to be able to protect people from COVID-19. The leaven of Herod essentially is putting the civil law above Yahweh's moral law. So Shaul, Paul, tells us to honor the civil law of the government that we are under. And, we're under the jurisdiction currently of President Biden. We're also under the jurisdiction of the Internal Revenue Service, whatever government agencies decide to make rules, the bureaucracy in Congress. So the leaven of Herod is trusting in civil laws and trusting in political movements more than trusting in Yahweh. The leaven of Herod is suggesting that when you cast a vote, you're going to see an outstanding social change to the point of where you're going to have a biblical society. You're going to have a utopia practically. Or you think that someone is going to save you or save a country or save this country. The only person that can save is Yeshua. No one else can save. I enjoy talking about political things. I enjoy observing political processes. I enjoy, even going to some of these events. Look, if I could pray with Donald Trump, I would pray with Donald Trump. If I could pray with Kamala Harris, I would pray with Kamala Harris if given the opportunity. But at the end of the day, that is not what saves you and I. And there are people who trust in the political movements, and it's okay to be an activist, and it's okay if you really like to vote, but just know that none of that's going to save you. If you do it and you're buying into this idea that the laws that Congress makes, the reforms that are made in Washington, D.C. are going to save you, that is the leaven of Herod. There's something really interesting, and that's this idea that Roman rulers were like saviors. Um, Roman rulers like Herod and Roman rulers like Caesar, they were seen as divine. They were basically seen as, God on earth, vessels, not just vessels, but vicars of the gods themselves. We look at, in the book of Acts, and if we read chapter 18, it talks about how because the Jews at Rome caused continuous disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus, who appears to be a Roman ruler trying to cause this riot and this chaos just to have an excuse to get them out, he expelled them from the city because he had the authority to do so. Now, Chrestus is very similar. This is very close to the Latin rendering of the name of Jesus Christ, meaning this guy is his name is basically suggestive of him being a Messiah figure. So if you're a Herodian, or you're a fan of Caesar or whatever, all these people, their allegiance primarily is to the Roman Empire. Their allegiance is to the governing leader that they believe is keeping the order and saving them. Whereas we're supposed to be trusting in Yeshua, we're supposed to be trusting in Yahweh. Sorry, to be quite clear about this, to be preserving order in our individual lives, because clearly he who is in this world, he's running this world right now. Yeshua, he said he's greater than that. But a lot of the times when we look at the political processes, when we look at what's happening in government, we put the he that is in this world over over Yahweh. We almost trust the he that is in this world more than we trust Yahweh. We trust a political process more than we trust a biblical principle. And it's really concerning. And so that's what I'm trying to dismantle here. And so let's go ahead and go to Deuteronomy chapter 12. And I want to say it's verse 8. Verse 8, Yahweh saying to Israel, "You shall not at all do what we are doing here today, everyone doing what is right in their eyes." And democracy is largely fueled by this idea of we get to do what we want, not what Yahweh wants, but what we want. We don't have to submit to his authority. We can place whoever we want in power, and that's the end all be all. And I understand we have the God-given freedom to vote in this country. We have that right. We also have the God-given freedom to abstain for conscience's sake. So if you don't think that Kamala Harris, or you don't think that Donald Trump, or you don't think that anybody else on the ballot is promoting your Christian values, then you need to assess whether you think it might be more faithful of you to abstain. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to give people a different perspective so that they don't feel that they're obligated to vote, when the Bible is teaching that we're supposed to let Yahweh choose who the leaders are. We're supposed to let Yahweh choose who's supposed to be head of the congregation. I mean, his ideal is for us to all be together right now. We're not. We're in the dispersion. We're all under different rules and regulations and laws. But his ideal would be for us all to be together and for him to appoint a singular ruler over us. And prophetically speaking, that will be Yeshua. And we're not going to be doing what's right in our own eyes. We're going to be doing exactly what he asks us to do. We're going to be following his specific instructions. And those commandments in the Brit Hadashah are equally commandments as what's stated in the Old Testament. And here's my proof. So Deuteronomy 18 and verse 15. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me, Moshe, from among you, from your countrymen. To him shall you listen. Okay, so whatever proceeds out of the mouth of Yeshua, okay, it has precedent in the Torah. You want to use legal language. It has precedent in the Torah where we're supposed to be listening to this prophet that is sent by Yahweh, on top of listening to the commandments that are explicitly listed. I can't believe I said that. Listed in the Tanakh, in the first 5 books of Moses. And that is, my friends and family, the end all be all. There is no other option. I wish I could say, look, we can do whatever we want. You can do what's right in your own eyes. If you take a Nazarite vow, you can, go near a bunch of dead bodies. I wish I said that things were anarchic in nature, but the thing is, democracy, and anarchy. So are all the keys and all the isms, they're all cousins. Democracy and anarchy are cousins, because when a democratic system fails, everybody's trusting in, oh, my God will protect me. My religion will protect me. My land, my fortress will protect me. Everything but Elohim. When we can easily go from being a democracy to slipping into an anarchy or into communism. All the isms, all the keys are related. God doesn't want us to be anarchic. God also doesn't want us to be under the system of another ism that is contrary to what is explained in Scripture. One thing that Yahweh says is for us to take care of the poor. None of the isms have a way of taking care of the poor. Democracy doesn't help us take care of the poor. A lot of people make campaign promises as they're campaigning. Oh, I'm going to help everybody make more money. We're going to raise the wages. We're going to create new jobs. We're going to create new manufacturing in this country. And a lot of that doesn't happen. That's the leaven of Herod. The fact that people keep buying that over and over again, thinking that there will be major radical change. Can Yahweh use political figures and Roman figures as vessels for his glory? Absolutely. Not denying that whatsoever. The reason why Herod Agrippa died was because he failed to give glory to Yahweh. He failed to give glory to Yahweh. Okay? He died. He failed to give glory to Yahweh. Read the book of Acts chapter 12. You can read James, son of Zacchaeus, and the story of him and Herod Agrippa, and how Herod died for failing to give glory to Yahweh for the sign that had been provided at that time. Okay. So I hope this is relatively straightforward. I mean, I hope this is really simple enough for everybody. Now, there are two other things that I haven't covered, and that's the fact that in God we trust. Like, if you look at the in God we trust that we have, I don't know if you can see this, but it's a little bright. But basically, if you look at in God we trust, that wasn't added to the dollar bill until 1955. Okay, 1955. We didn't see that in this country. So in Elohim we trust should always be our motto. It should not be. It should not be left out of. If we're going to be the nation of Israel, it shouldn't be left out of our nation's motto for about 170 something odd years. It should be something that we live by day. Furthermore, under God, we look at when it was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. It wasn't added until the year 1954. One nation under God was not added until 1954, and in 1955, it was added by the Congress of the United States. This is Public Law 84 through 140, and then the first dollars that were printed and that were made with that and put into circulation, that happened on October 1st, 1957. Okay, so we covered a lot of stuff today. I think we did, and I may wrap up with a few thoughts like maybe you're having man-to-man conversations. I know plenty of congregations that love having man-to-man or woman-to-woman or woman-to-man, bi-gender, co-ed conversations about democracy, politics, what's going on in the real world. It's okay to discuss real things. I have no problem with that. That is absolutely common sense. It's a thing that we do. We love talking about that stuff. I do too. I'm not going to be all tyrannical about this. I'm just making warnings from a scriptural point of view about why these processes might not be a part of God's will. Now, so as I said before, no being negligent on taxes. We got to follow the 16th Amendment, right? which allows Congress to do the taxes, but then there are the revenue acts that soon followed that, which allow Congress to tax the American people. Even if you have to pay 40% in taxes, don't wind yourself up in jail. Don't wind up in jail because you decided that you wanted to be a sovereign citizen. Again, as Shaul said, government bears the sword for no reason. So, in conclusion, um, we should be vigilant about what our voting processes truly entail, what they truly mean. I'm not going to tell you what to do because that's up to you and Yahweh. That's between you and Yahweh. That's for you to get a conviction about. Um, but that these preachers shouldn't be saying that voting is a biblical mandate. I know people who have abstained from several elections because they have felt convicted in terms of politicians have not been they've not been morally inclined to either preach or teach the law of God or to even preach or teach Christian morals. And if they do, they're hardly even adhering to them, and they're making compromises and voting for bills that go completely contrary to that. You look at Mike Johnson. One thing that I remember about Mike Johnson was it was very popular for him to say, and I'm saying this as an American national, that he wanted to, get rid of abortion. He wanted to do a lot of his things off of a biblical perspective, but then he ended up voting for a bill that, made the budget for fiscal year 2024, 2025. And in that bill was included some money for, abortion clinics, a new federal Bureau of Investigation office. But the abortion clinics, clearly, they go against Yahweh's commandments in scripture to the fact that he doesn't like hands that shed innocent blood. But there are commandments about not killing innocent life. Yahweh doesn't like that. Sacrificing your children to a false god. And even if these abortions specifically aren't that, they're problematic scripturally. So I just wanted to address that, wanted to go over that, and just talk about all that, because a lot of this stuff can mean life and death. And I think punditry is one thing, activism is one thing, but I think when you're telling people that they must engage in the democratic process in order to truly be a Christian is problematic. So I thought I'd go over that and cover that today. I hope everybody has a blessed evening, and shalom, shalom.